Are you ready to hear about serial murders from all over the world? But this time the story is not from America or Europe. This story comes from the dark backstreets of Istanbul, from the fear thrown under the sea. The year 2000. As the city woke up in the morning, human legs began to appear in the garbage. Women, men, bodies with no identity, and no one spoke. Not the state, not the media, not the police. Everyone was silent. It takes courage to remember a forgotten case. That's why we are here, to face the darkness and tell you the truth. This is not just the story of a leg. This is the sound of a silenced scream. January 8th, 2000. As Istanbul woke up in the morning, the lid of the garbage container opened with a heavy creak. What the cleaning worker saw that morning was something he would remember for the rest of his life. A black garbage bag. Out of it, a woman's leg. But it didn't look like a murder. It was, like a message. The cleaner couldn't get over the shock immediately. It was the first time he had ever seen a human leg. It took him at least 10 to 15 minutes to recover from the shock, and the first thing he did was to call the police and report the incident. The police came and took both the leg and the cleaner to the police station. The first thing they did was to take the cleaner's statement, and then the leg was sent to forensic medicine. The forensic report was clear. It belonged to a woman aged 26 to 27. The hair had been removed. Her nails were well groomed. The skin was smooth. It was as if it had been carefully prepared. It was as if it had been taken not from a life but from a ceremony. The first day nobody understood. It was thought that there had been an ordinary murder, and that the murdered woman had been dismembered and scattered in certain parts of Istanbul so that she would not be found. But then everyone felt it. This was the beginning, and unfortunately, it was not the end. May 19th, 2000, Bosphorus. On that day, a man took his fishing rods and went to the Bosphorus to go fishing. As he made his preparations, he noticed how calm the surface of the sea was. But what came from under the water was not peace, but fear. The fisherman saw a floating garbage bag, but this was not like normal garbage. It had weight, and it had a shape. Curious, he pulled the garbage bag towards him with the help of the fishing line. And suddenly he was confronted with fear. It smelled very bad and was shaped like a human leg. The first thing he did was to call the police to report it, and then, frightened, he went to the side, lit a cigarette, and waited for the police officers to arrive on the scene. Crime scene investigation and police officers took the garbage bag and the fisherman to the police station. The fisherman was taken into custody as a precautionary measure, and the legs were sent to forensic medicine. What came out of the bag belonged to two people, two different legs, both belonging to different women. But there was something worse. Those legs had dark red nail polish on their fingernails. This couldn't be a coincidence. It was a symbol, and maybe that was the killer's greatest passion, or the killer's signature. Forensic experts said the legs were again well-groomed, clean and protected, just like in the first case. They had been soaked in salt water so as not to spoil them. They were thought to belong to women aged between 25 and 30. Other parts of their bodies were not found. No identification, no DNA, no cameras, no witnesses. A lot of thought went into what this red nail polish meant. Was it just aesthetic, or was it a signature? For some, the killer continued to present his victims even after their deaths. They were no longer women. They were objects, figures, pieces of his own gallery of horror. But the question was, where did these legs come from? And how many more were hidden in the waters, garbage bags, unknown corners of Istanbul? The second find revealed something that no one could deny anymore. This was not a massacre. This was a staged, planned serial murder, and we were being dragged into it. December 7th, 2000, Company. A group of high school students were on their way home after school. The usual chaos, noise, traffic of Istanbul. Then, one of them noticed a garbage bag on the sidewalk. It looked like an ordinary black bag, but the shape inside was disturbing. Continues in a breathy voice, reflecting curiosity and uneasiness. At first, they just touched it. The bag was soft, but one side was bony. One of them dared to open it. What they saw, when they opened it, changed them for life. At first, they shouted and screamed in fear. People in the neighborhood rushed to the screams of the students. The place became crowded. One of the citizens immediately called the police to report the situation. When the police and crime scene investigation teams arrived at the place where the garbage bag was found, there was a curious crowd. First, they drove people away, and then they opened the bag and started to check it. What came out was a woman's leg. This leg was very similar to the legs found earlier. Again, it was carefully cut. It was clean again. Again, with red nail polish on the nails. But this time, a single leg, a single school exit, had silenced the whole of Istanbul. Forensics has estimated her age. It belonged to a young woman between 22 and 24 years old. Pedicured nails, cleaned skin. The same message again. This was not a victim. It was an exposure, a presentation, a challenge. When it was reported in the press, it resonated with the public. It was no longer just about fear. People now recognized that these events were not independent of each other, that a series of murders had begun. But the authorities chose to remain silent, because this was not just a leg, this was a scream echoing through the system. That day, another woman's leg was found, but what was found was that the silence had begun to turn into a scream. December 25th, 2000, Maltepe. A woman doing her morning exercise on a hiking trail near the coastline in eastern Istanbul first noticed the smell. A garbage bag thrown among the trees, and a strange liquid oozing from it. One end of the bag was torn, a leg was sticking out of it, but this time it was a little different. The woman who was out for a run called the police first thing, and took 3 to 4 photos of the bag from a distance with her cell phone. She was both very scared and wanted to secure herself with that fear in order not to fall into any liability or any other situation. By the time police teams arrived at the scene, the woman had collapsed and fainted from fear. Other people walking in the neighborhood called an ambulance to the scene, and they all focused on the place where the smell was coming from and watched what was happening with curious eyes. When the team arrived at the scene, when they opened the bag, they found 2 legs in the same bag, but this time one belonged to a woman and the other to a man. For the first time, there was a gender difference. Was this a new message from the killer? A man and a woman in the same garbage bag? Was it a double murder? Or was the killer now trying a new formula? Female leg, 25 years old, pedicured, smooth, classic red nail polish. Male leg, 30 years old, well-groomed, hair removed. The way they were cut was the same, like a surgical cut. Cleanliness is the same. The salt water marks, the same. It was no longer just an anger or obsession with women. It became a perverse interest in the human body. So, maybe women weren't the only target. Maybe you were targeted too. We were, you, me, all of us. This bag was a turning point. Because this bag made us think that the killer was no longer just killing, he was making art. And maybe the message was now not body, but identity. Not identity, but gender. Everyone can be the same victim. With this case, no one was safe anymore. Not women, not men, not young, not old. It was no longer important who the victim was, but how they were presented. As 2001 approached, legs belonging to 6 different people were found in 4 separate incidents in Istanbul. Each one surfaced in a different place at a different time by a different coincidence. But none of them had an identity. No matching DNA, no missing persons report, no CCTV footage. It was as if these people had never been recorded in their entire lives, as if they had never existed. And how was this possible? In one of Turkey's most populous, most controlled cities, how could these people have quietly disappeared, been murdered, dismembered, and thrown around? This is where the system comes into play. The following headlines started to appear on all news websites and newspapers. The prosecutor's office did not comment on the case. Istanbul police banned leaking information to the press. A publication ban was imposed in order not to alarm the public. It was clear that someone did not want these events to be heard. Every leg, every bag, every silence seemed to be sealed with the invisibility of the system. And we were being hunted in this very silence. Why didn't the press write? Why didn't the authorities speak out? Why didn't the police do a profile? These questions were always asked, but there was no answer at the time. Actually, it was much simpler, because they were either scared or they already knew. If you think this is the work of a psychopath, think again. If you think this is just the work of a maniac, a monster who carries a bag at night, think again, because this story is not just about a killer. There are those who turned a blind eye, those who kept silent, those who covered it up, and so much more. These cases were not just murders. These cases are about how the system works in the dark, and perhaps full of those who started a new hunt to silence anyone who opened their eyes. And we are still just looking at the legs. 6 legs, 4 incidents, 0 identity. How was this possible? Thousands of people go missing in Istanbul every year. Missing persons notices are placed, TV appearances are made, social media campaigns are launched. But in these cases, there was none of that. Not a brother, not a lover, not a neighbor. No one had searched for these people. And who were these women? Who were these men? How could these people have disappeared so quietly? According to the forensic reports, the body was well groomed, so they weren't living on the street. But they had no documents. They were not mentioned in the registration systems. Experts offered 3 possibilities. First, they were victims of human trafficking. They were women illegally brought to Turkey and forced into the sex trade. Second, they were homeless people pushed out of the system, individuals who had lost their identity, who had been erased from society due to mental disorders. Thirdly, migrants working informally, cheap labor, invisible lives. But there was another possibility. Maybe these people had been stolen from us. Maybe from state-run dormitories, protected institutions, secret programs. Maybe they were taken into the system as children but never officially registered. No one looked for them because no one knew about them. These people are not just victims. They are the voice of the unseen, the cry of the unseen. And even today, maybe they are still alive. Maybe they are still kept in a bag behind a wall in the shadow of a statistic. Being anonymous is a quieter extinction than being dead. And in this story, the quietest ones were the most broken. No one looked for them because no one knew them. Urban legend or organized darkness. Between 2000 and 2001, legs were found in different parts of Istanbul, bringing the total to 7 cases. But as well as the victims, there was one question that everyone was now asking. Who was the killer? I'm sorry if you expect a simple answer. Because this question does not point to just one person. According to one theory, it was a lone wolf, a lonely, a social man who lived alone. Maybe a butcher, maybe a doctor, maybe an invisible person working the night shift. But another theory, much more disturbing, some researchers say that the planned and systematic way in which events unfold is part of a structure. Yes, it sounds like a conspiracy, but let's be honest, we are talking about a system in this city that for years did not see people living on the streets, did not care about missing women, and defined foreign nationals only as illegals. Maybe the killer was not one person. Maybe it was a silent clause in a protocol. Maybe he was just the enforcer. Maybe he took orders. Maybe he was trained. Maybe we watched him without even realizing it. And maybe he is still among us because he had a signature: red nail polish, perfect cuts, salt water, and above all, silence. Do you know, maybe while you're watching this video right now, another bag prepared by her is being left in a corner. Is there just one killer? Or are we watching a ghost? Maybe a ghost is walking around right in the middle of Istanbul, and we just can't see it. At the beginning of 2001, after the last leg case in Istanbul, suddenly everything stopped. No new findings, no new revelations, no arrests. The investigation was said to be ongoing. But it soon became clear that the investigation was nothing more than a dusty shelf file. There was a file, but there was neither evidence nor a name in it. Prosecution, insufficient evidence. Police, no matching suspects. Forensics, no victims identified. And the media? The media didn't write anything anymore because they were forbidden to write in order not to alarm the public. At that time, any news about the murders was limited to the first paragraph. The rest was either omitted or not published at all. Some journalists went after these cases, but their articles disappeared on editorial desks. Some were dismissed, some left the profession. So this was not just a chain of murders, it was like a memory erasure operation. As well as the legs, those who remembered were also removed as if everyone had fallen into silence. Maybe we are no one if we can still talk about this story. This case is not closed because it was never really opened, and this case has not been forgotten, but it has not been concluded. This was not just the story of a leg. It was the story of people left without identity. Maybe these people really disappeared and someone loved them. Someone had breakfast with them one morning. Maybe someone waited for them one evening. And then they forgot. They had to forget. Because sometimes the system doesn't just kill, it silences. These people whose names we don't know, they belong to us now. No one wrote their stories. No one told them. Maybe that's why it's our duty to write, to tell, because we didn't just look at the legs, we listened to the places where eyes looked, but no one saw. Do you know what most people look at on the internet today? Shoes, heels, nail polish colors, beauty products, smooth skin. Those legs were once part of this world, just like you. This was not just the story of a leg. It was the story of everything we ignored. And now we are as complicit as we are silent. Those legs may still be out there somewhere. Or a new one has already been prepared. You're left with only one question. This time, will you be able to see? This time, will you be able to call on the police, forensics and governments to solve these murders? Or will you be a silent, forgotten victim of a psychopath or an order? Turkey could not solve the serial murders in a magnificent city like Istanbul at that time. Was this situation only the fault of Turkey, or were there unsolved serial murders in different countries? Please specify the stories you want me to investigate in the comments. Let's bring the facts to light together. Maybe we can solve the murders that huge countries cannot solve.